The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and distant wood smoke, as best friends Mia and Jordan sped down a winding back road, their laughter echoing through the open windows of Jordan's battered Honda Civic. They'd left a bonfire party after Mia, ever the introvert, grew uneasy around the rowdy crowd. Jordan, loyal to a fault, didn't hesitate to leave with her. Now the moon hung low, casting long shadows over the labyrinth of gravel roads cutting through Oregon's dense Tillamook forest. "You sure this is a shortcut?" Mia asked, squinting at the GPS. The screen flickered, the signal patchy. "Relax," Jordan said, grinning. "I've driven these roads 100 times." But the confidence wavered as they rounded a bend and the asphalt dissolved into potholed dirt. The trees closed in, skeletal branches clawing at the sky. A roar erupted behind them. Headlights, twin halogen suns, blinded them in the rearview. A jacked-up Jeep Wrangler, its chassis lifted high on monstrous tires, loomed like a mechanized predator. The grille was armored, the windshield tinted black, and a row of off-road lights crowned the roof, unlit but menacing. The driver's face was a shadow beneath a baseball cap. "What the hell?" Jordan muttered, speeding up. The Jeep matched their pace. Mia's chest tightened. "Let them pass." Jordan swerved to the shoulder, but the Jeep didn't overtake. It inched closer, bumper kissing their trunk. "Go!" Mia screamed. Jordan floored the gas. The Civic's engine whined, hurtling them forward at 70 miles per hour, but the Jeep kept pace effortlessly. Gravel sprayed like gunfire. Mia white-knuckled the door handle, her phone sliding off the dash. No signal. The road forked. Jordan veered left, tires skidding. The Jeep followed, its horn blaring a long, taunting wail. "He's playing with us," Jordan breathed. Ahead, the road narrowed, swallowed by overgrowth. Branches scraped the Civic's sides. The Jeep's engine growled, closer now. A deer leapt from the woods. Jordan yanked the wheel. The car fishtailed, spinning into a ditch with a metallic crunch. Steam hissed from the hood. Silence. Then the Jeep stopped, idling behind them. The driver's door creaked open. A man stepped out, tall, wiry, face hidden by a black ski mask. In his gloved hand, a tire iron glinted. "Run!" Jordan hissed. They bolted into the woods, sneakers sinking into mulch. The man gave chase, his laughter jagged. Mia's lungs burned. They zigzagged through ferns, the Jeep's headlights piercing the trees. Jordan grabbed her arm, pulling her behind a mossy boulder. They crouched, breath held. Footsteps crunched nearby. The man hummed tunelessly, tapping the tire iron against his palm. Clink, clink, clink. Mia squeezed her eyes shut. A twig snapped. The footsteps faded. "We need to circle back to the road," Jordan whispered. "Find a house or a car." They crept east, guided by the moon. After an eternity, the trees thinned, revealing a derelict gas station. A flickering neon sign read, "Open." "Thank God," Mia gasped. They sprinted toward the light, but froze. Parked beside the building was the Jeep. The man leaned against the hood, arms crossed. "Took you long enough," he drawled. Jordan stepped forward, trembling. "What do you want?" The man tilted his head. "You kids shouldn't be out here." He hefted the tire iron. "Stranger danger and all." Mia's eyes darted to the gas station. An old pickup truck sat at a pump, its driver loading supplies. She screamed, "Help us!" The Jeep man lunged. Jordan tackled Mia sideways as the tire iron smashed the ground where they'd stood. The pickup's driver, a burly man in flannel, jogged over. "The hell's going on?" The masked man froze, then bolted to his Jeep and peeled onto the road, vanishing into the night. The flannel-clad man, introducing himself as Hank, called the sheriff. Deputies arrived within minutes, taking statements. Mia's hands wouldn't stop shaking. "That Jeep's been prowling these woods," one deputy said. "Stole a generator from a cabin last week. We'll set up roadblocks." Hank offered to drive the girls home. As they climbed into his truck, Mia noticed a sticker on his bumper, a coiled rattlesnake with the words, "Back Road Patrol." "You're not a serial killer, right?" Jordan blurted. Hank laughed. "Nah, just a hunter, but I bag deer, not teenagers." At Mia's house, they hugged, adrenaline melting into exhausted relief. The sheriff called the next morning. The Jeep had been found abandoned, the driver identified as a local meth head wanted for burglary. "Still want to take shortcuts?" Mia asked Jordan later, sipping tea on her porch. Jordan smirked and replied, "No." It was a quiet autumn evening when the three of us, Jake, Emma, and I, decided to take a long drive out of town. We were looking for some excitement, some escape from the monotony of our small lives. The leaves were turning, painting the world outside in rich shades of orange and gold, and the air had a crisp bite to it that made us roll down the windows. We had no particular destination in mind, just driving along the winding roads, laughing and joking as we always did. But none of us could have anticipated the terror that would await us that night. We were about 20 miles out of town, on a long stretch of highway that was more desolate than usual, the kind of road where the moonlight was your only companion, and the darkness seemed to stretch forever. It was just the kind of road you'd expect a hitchhiker to appear on. We had just passed a rusted old sign marking the edge of town when we saw him, standing on the side of the road, his thumb raised in the universal sign of needing a ride. He was tall, with ragged clothes, and his face was obscured by the shadow of his hood. At first, we didn't think twice about it. It wasn't the first time we'd seen a hitchhiker, and we figured he was just another traveler passing through. "Should we stop?" Jake asked, glancing at Emma and me. Emma was the first to speak. "I don't know. It's pretty late, and it feels strange." I nodded, sensing a chill in the air, though it wasn't the wind. But the thought of someone stranded in the dark alone was too much for me to ignore. "We should help him. It's the right thing to do." Jake shrugged, looking back at Emma. "What do you think?" She hesitated, and for a split second I saw doubt flicker in her eyes. But then she shrugged as well. "Fine, but we're not going too far out of our way." The car slowed down, and we pulled over to the side of the road. The hitchhiker didn't seem to notice us at first, standing there with his head down, hands in his pockets. We waited a moment, the engine idling, before he finally looked up. His eyes were wide, almost unnaturally so, as if there was something not quite right about them. He was silent for a long moment before stepping toward the car. "Thank you," he said in a voice that was too calm, too measured. I unlocked the door, and he slid in without another word. His movements were fluid, like he had done this 100 times. I couldn't help but notice how cold he felt as he sat down, like he had been standing in the freezing wind for hours. It wasn't just the temperature. There was something more to it. We didn't speak for the first few minutes of the drive. The only sound was the hum of the tires on the pavement and the occasional creak of the car as it made its way down the empty highway. I could feel my heartbeat quicken, but I tried to dismiss it. It was just my imagination, right? There was nothing wrong with a hitchhiker, even if he did seem off. "You're heading into town?" I finally asked, breaking the silence. He didn't immediately answer, and when he did, his words seemed strangely delayed, as if he were choosing them carefully. "Yes, I need to get back there." There was something odd in the way he spoke, like he was trying to say something else, but the words weren't coming out right. I glanced at Emma, who met my eyes with a silent look of unease. Jake, however, seemed unbothered, as usual. He chuckled. "Well, we're headed to the diner. You can drop off there if you want." The hitchhiker's lips twitched into a slight smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "No, I need to go further," he said cryptically. The car fell silent again, but this time the atmosphere felt different, tighter. He was sitting so still in the back seat, his hands folded neatly in his lap, but there was a palpable sense of something lurking in the air, something that wasn't right. We drove on, each of us lost in our thoughts, until we came upon a stretch of road where the trees lined both sides, casting shadows that seemed to grow longer with each passing second. That was when we heard it. A soft scratching sound, barely audible over the hum of the engine. At first, I thought it was just the wind, or perhaps the car's undercarriage scraping against something. But then the sound grew louder, more deliberate, like something or someone was tapping against the window. My breath hitched in my throat, and I glanced in the rearview mirror. The hitchhiker was still sitting there, but his face was now pressed against the window. His eyes were wide open, his pupils dilated, and his mouth was stretched into a grotesque grin. I turned away quickly, but I could feel the coldness creeping up my spine. I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. "Jake, stop the car," I whispered urgently, but it was too late. The hitchhiker's hand shot out, gripping the door handle with inhuman strength, as if he had been waiting for the exact moment to strike. His eyes locked onto mine in the mirror, and I saw something flash across them, a glimpse of pure madness. "Stop the car!" I shouted, panic rising in my chest. Jake slammed on the brakes, and the car lurched to a halt. The hitchhiker, with an unnatural speed, slid out of the car and vanished into the trees before any of us could react. We were left in stunned silence, the only sound now the pounding of our hearts. We sat there for a few moments, unsure of what to do. Emma was the first to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. "What the hell was that?" "I don't know," Jake said, his voice unsteady, "but I don't want to find out." We didn't wait around to discuss it further. Jake quickly threw the car into reverse, and we sped off in the opposite direction, hearts pounding, eyes darting nervously to every shadow along the road. As we reached the edge of town, the unease still gnawed at me, but I tried to push it away. We were safe now. The hitchhiker was gone, and we could forget it ever happened. But when we finally arrived back at my house, something caught my eye, a faint silhouette standing at the edge of the trees near my driveway. It was him, the hitchhiker. His eyes gleamed in the darkness, his grin wide and predatory, and as I watched, he slowly raised his hand, his fingers curling into a beckoning motion. My stomach twisted in horror. I didn't wait to see more. I slammed the door shut and locked it, my mind racing. The next day, we told ourselves it was just some odd experience, something to laugh about in the future. But that night, when I closed my eyes to sleep, I saw him again in my dreams. His eyes following me, his hand reaching for me. The hitchhiker, it seemed, wasn't quite done with us yet. That night, as I lay in bed, the silence of my room felt thicker than usual. The house creaked and groaned as if it were alive. And just when I was beginning to drift off, I felt it, a subtle, prickling sensation at the back of my neck. It wasn't the wind or the house settling. It was something else. A presence. I glanced toward the window. The blinds were slightly open. Outside, the darkness was thick, the kind that swallows everything. But for a brief moment, I thought I saw something, someone, standing at the edge of the yard. It was too dark to be sure, but I could feel those eyes on me, even from a distance. I turned away, hoping it was nothing more than my imagination. But the sensation of being watched didn't fade. Somewhere just beyond the glass, I heard a faint, rasping breath, and then nothing. The full moon hung above us, casting an eerie glow over the desolate countryside. My friends and I, 5 of us, had driven out into the middle of nowhere, searching for a secluded spot to party. It was the perfect setup. A bit of weed, a couple of beers, and no one around for miles. Drew, the one who always got us into these kinds of messes, grinned from the driver's seat as he navigated the winding backcountry roads. The truck bounced over the uneven ground, creaking beneath our weight. The rest of us, me, Jess, and the others, were just excited for the night to unfold. It felt like an adventure. "Man, this is going to be epic," Drew said, his voice filled with that reckless excitement we all shared. After a few more turns, the truck pulled onto a dirt path that seemed to lead nowhere. The trees closed in on both sides, casting long, jagged shadows. A feeling of unease settled over me, but I brushed it off. We were here to have fun. The last thing I wanted was to ruin the mood with a bad vibe. Eventually, we reached a clearing at the edge of an old cornfield. The stalks were tall and dense, swaying gently in the wind under the moonlight. An old, abandoned barn loomed in the distance, its wooden frame weathered and forgotten. It was the perfect spot for what we had in mind. "This is it," Drew said, cutting the engine. No one around, just us. We piled out of the truck, cracking open beers and lighting up a joint. The night was quiet, save for the occasional rustle of the corn. We leaned against the truck, talking, laughing, and watching the smoke curl up into the cold night air. It felt like we had escaped reality for a while. But as the minutes passed, something shifted. The air grew heavier, the wind slower, and the rustling in the cornfield grew louder, too loud. It wasn't the wind anymore. The noise was deliberate, heavy, almost like footsteps. Something was moving through the corn, and it wasn't just the breeze. "Did you guys hear that?" Drew asked, suddenly looking uneasy. At first I thought it was nothing, but then I noticed it too. The rustling wasn't natural, it wasn't wind, it was purposeful. "Yeah, I hear it," I said, my voice tight. Jess, sitting next to me, shivered and turned to the others. "It's probably just animals, right? It's a farm field. Could be a deer or something." But I didn't feel reassured. The sound wasn't like any animal I knew. It was too deliberate, too steady, like something pacing through the corn. Thud, thud, thud. The heavy footsteps grew louder. Whatever it was coming closer. A chill ran down my spine. "Okay, this is weird," Drew muttered. His voice was quieter now, more nervous. I looked around, trying to see what it was, but the cornfield was dark, the moonlight barely cutting through the rows of stalks. I couldn't make out anything beyond shadows. Then came a crack, a loud snap from somewhere in the field. We all jumped. "What the hell was that?" Jess whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know," Drew said, "but we need to go. Now." Before anyone could say another word, we heard it, a low, faint whisper. It was so soft at first, like the wind carrying a secret, but there was no mistaking it. It was a voice, human, but distorted, twisted. "Did you hear that?" Drew's voice was barely above a whisper. We all nodded, terrified. The whispering grew louder, more insistent, but we couldn't make out the words. It was like a language we didn't understand, a murmur that was barely more than a breath in the wind. Then the footsteps came again, this time much closer. Thud, thud, thud. I could almost feel the earth vibrating beneath me. Whatever was in that field wasn't some animal. It was something much bigger and much more dangerous. "We need to leave," I said, my voice breaking. "Now." But as I looked back at the truck, I felt rooted to the spot. The air had grown so heavy, so thick with something I couldn't name. It was like a pressure in my chest, like I couldn't move. "We're not alone," Drew said, his eyes wide. "Something's out there." It was then that I saw it. In the corner of my vision, just beyond the edge of the field, a dark figure emerged. It wasn't human. The shape was too tall, too unnatural. It stood perfectly still in the shadow of the corn, its limbs stretched out impossibly long, like they were reaching for us. It was the darkest thing in the night, darker than the shadows around it. I couldn't see its face, but I could feel its presence. It was watching us. The whispering stopped, and for a moment everything went silent. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I knew was that we needed to get away. Now. "Run!" Drew screamed, breaking the spell. We turned and bolted for the truck, our hearts racing. I could hear the heavy footsteps behind us, moving closer and closer with each passing second. I didn't dare look back, but I could feel it. Whatever was in the field, it was coming for us. The whispering returned, rising into a low growl, and I knew we weren't just being watched, we were being hunted. We piled into the truck, slamming the doors shut. Without even thinking, Drew threw the truck into gear and sped off down the dirt path, kicking up gravel in our wake. My heart hammered in my chest as the cornfield and the figure in it disappeared behind us. We didn't stop until we reached the main road, until we were back in the safety of town. But even then, we didn't speak. The air in the truck was thick with fear. We all felt it, the presence that had followed us, that had watched us from the edge of the field. It wasn't over. Whatever it was, wasn't done with us. The car hummed steadily along the interstate as we made our way back from the beach. The air was thick with the weight of the summer night, the kind of heat that sticks to your skin even after the sun is set. My girlfriend Lisa was driving, her hands relaxed on the wheel as she navigated the empty highway. The windows were cracked open, letting in the cool rush of the evening breeze. We'd spent the day by the ocean, soaking up the salt water and the sun. We were both exhausted, content in that way only a day at the beach can make you feel. It was just past midnight. The highway was quiet, stretching out before us in long, lonely ribbons of asphalt. We'd driven for hours, the rhythmic motion of the tires on the road almost hypnotic. The only sound besides the engine was the occasional flicker of the radio, playing softly in the background. I had been half dozing in the passenger seat, the kind of tiredness that only comes after a day of sun, when I glanced out the window. In the distance, the headlights of a truck appeared, its beams piercing the darkness. I didn't think much of it. Interstate driving at night often felt like this, empty, stretching on forever, punctuated by the occasional set of lights that would appear out of nowhere before vanishing again. But then something shifted. The truck, which had been just a speck in the distance, was suddenly right behind us. I glanced at the rearview mirror, trying to adjust my eyes to the glare of the lights. The truck was a massive black diesel, its grille looming like some kind of mechanical monster. It didn't seem to make sense. We had been cruising along at a steady speed, nothing fast enough to justify how quickly the truck had caught up with us. "Lisa," I said, my voice a little tight, "there's a truck right behind us." She glanced in the mirror, her brow furrowing. "Yeah, I see him." But then the truck didn't just stay behind us. It started to move side to side, weaving in and out of the lane, as if trying to get closer. Lisa's fingers tightened on the wheel, and she let off the gas a little, thinking he might pass. But the truck didn't pass. Instead, it lingered on our tail like it was waiting for something. We both felt it then, the hairs on the back of our necks standing up, that low, crawling sensation of something being off. I tried to push the unease from my mind, telling myself I was overthinking it. But as the truck's headlights grew brighter, that discomfort turned into something darker. "Should we speed up?" Lisa asked, her voice tight with nerves. "Yeah, I think we should," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She pressed the pedal a little harder, and the car surged forward. But the truck kept pace, matching our speed with unnerving precision. My heart rate picked up as I stared at the rearview mirror, trying to make sense of what was happening. This wasn't normal. Trucks didn't behave like this. We were still on the flat stretch of the interstate, no exits or turns for miles. The road felt like a tunnel, the darkness pressing in from all sides. The truck seemed to be getting closer again, its headlights blinding in the mirror, making it hard to see anything else. And then, as if to emphasize how much control it had, the truck swerved violently toward our lane. Lisa gasped, jerking the wheel to the right. We skidded for a moment, tires squealing against the asphalt as the truck pulled back to its lane, now right beside us. The driver's side window of the truck was rolled down, and I caught a glimpse of the man behind the wheel, his face a pale, twisted mask of rage. He was glaring at us, his eyes wild, his lips curled in a sneer. The man's expression was so intense it was like he wanted to tear us apart. He seemed to be egging us on, daring us to make the wrong move. I could see his knuckles white on the steering wheel, his whole body coiled with tension. "Don't look at him," Lisa said, her voice rising with panic. "Don't look at him!" But I couldn't look away. Something about the intensity of his glare held me in place, as if he was daring us to defy him, daring us to blink. We were caught in some kind of primal standoff. I didn't know who this man was, but I could tell we were both afraid of what he might do next. In the mirror, the truck swerved again, this time pulling even closer to us, the giant vehicle threatening to push us off the road. My breath caught in my throat. "He's trying to run us off the road." Lisa's grip tightened on the wheel, her knuckles turning white. "I can't shake him. He's too close." It was like a nightmare unfolding. The truck was right next to us now, a wall of steel that seemed to crowd us out of the lane. I could feel the vibrations of the tires as the truck roared beside us, the noise deafening. I couldn't focus on anything except the sound of the engine, the harsh, angry blare of it. "Lisa, please, just get away," I begged, my voice cracking. "We need to get away from him." "I'm trying," she shouted back, eyes wide with fear. "He's not letting me." We veered left, swerving to avoid the truck, but he was right there, a shadow, always following. The truck's headlights seemed to grow larger, swallowing up everything in front of us. I had no idea why he was doing this, but one thing was certain: we were in real danger. "Pull off the road, Lisa," I urged. She nodded, her mind racing, trying to think of any way to escape. The highway stretched on in both directions, flat and empty, but there were no exits, no way to break the madness. The truck wasn't backing off, wasn't slowing down. Suddenly, Lisa slammed on the brakes. The car fishtailed for a moment, the tires screeching as she jerked the wheel to the right. The truck followed, but now we had the advantage. We were on the shoulder, the tires grinding over gravel, the car swerving erratically. The truck pulled behind us, its headlights blinding, but it wasn't gaining ground anymore. Lisa's foot slammed down harder on the gas, and we shot forward again, back into the main lane, narrowly avoiding a collision with the guardrail. For a split second, the truck backed off, as if reconsidering its next move. We sped forward, my heart hammering in my chest, my body trembling with adrenaline. Lisa was breathing fast, her face pale but determined. She didn't look at me, didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. The truck, for whatever reason, decided to drop back. As we gained speed, it finally disappeared into the dark horizon, the sound of its engine fading like a distant thunderstorm. We didn't stop after that. We just kept driving, our eyes flickering to the rearview mirror every few seconds, waiting for him to reappear, for the headlights to glow once more in the distance. But they never did. We finally made it to an exit about 30 minutes later, heartbeats still racing, the adrenaline slowly ebbing away. Lisa parked the car at a gas station, the flickering fluorescent lights casting an eerie glow over the lot. Neither of us spoke for a while. We just sat there, the quiet of the night settling in around us. I don't know what possessed that man, what made him so angry. Maybe we had looked at him too long. Maybe it was just the heat of the night, the isolation of the interstate. But whatever it was, I know this: we barely made it out of there alive. And to this day, I can't stop thinking about that truck, about the man behind the wheel. I wonder if he's out there, still lurking, still searching for someone else to drive off the road. Because the terror we felt that night wasn't just from the truck. It was from the uncertainty of why it happened, from knowing there are people out there who would do anything for no reason at all.